Today on episode 176 of the Author Stories podcast with Hank Garner, my guest is Cindy Brown.
In real life, it'd probably be in my blackberry bushes because no one would go in there and the coyotes would eat them. And I just looked down there once and I thought, oh my God, that is a great place to hide a body.
Hey there, Author Story listeners. This is Kevin Tomlinson from Draft to Digital, and I know that you have a book sitting there just waiting to get out to the world, and you're kind of wondering what the next steps are. So that's why you need to go visit drafttodigital.com/authorstories. That's draft2digital.com/authorstories, and that's where you're going to find all the help you need to go from having a book on your hard drive to having it on someone's Kindle or iPad or other reading device. So go visit drafttodigital.com/authorstories right now.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. This is episode 176. You can find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com. And I really appreciate it if you'd go over and click on the subscribe button over in the right-hand sidebar. It helps other people find the show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week. ThirdScribe.com is there to connect you, writers and readers, together. If you are a writer, you know that you need an author platform. You need a place where people can find you, read your books, buy your books, connect with you, and the same thing with readers. You can connect with some of your favorite authors at ThirdScribe.com. Please tell them that Hank sent you. Also, the new book by Aaron Saylor, Sewerville, a Southern gangster novel. It's like The Sopranos in Appalachia. Rises at times to lyrical beauty, says author Mark Rubenstein. A small-time hood tries to escape the family business in this powerful story of crime and drug abuse in rural America. Sewerville is violent and profane, but in the end, it's also deeply moving. Considered an essential tale of modern crime in the American South. Pick it up on Amazon.com. There's a link in the show notes. I'd also like to thank Daniel Arthur Smith and the great folks at Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. There's a brand new episode out. Go pick it up today. Don't forget to stay tuned after the episode for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' Jason Crane series. From April 4th to April 8th, 2017, the first book, Rise, Headless, and Ride, is free on Amazon. I discovered this book a couple of years ago, and Richard's been one of my favorite authors ever since. So pick up the book. There's a link in the show notes. Now on to our show. Six String, the new book by Stefan Boltz. Jennifer Dalton dreamed of being a singer for as long as she could remember. The dream has kept her alive throughout a childhood mired in poverty in a broken and abusive home. When her younger brother dies and her mother takes refuge in alcohol, the emotional toll becomes unbearable. One morning she runs away, taking with her the one thing she owns, her beloved six-string guitar. This is the story of a girl finding herself alone in the good and the bad, the friends she makes, and a choice that could rob her of everything she's won. Six String by Stefan Boltz, now available on Amazon.com.
Please welcome to the stage, Jennifer Dalton!
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today I've got a guest that I'm really excited about having. Cindy Brown writes these really unique books, and we'll get into that in just a minute, but they are mysteries with a setting that is very near and dear to my heart. When I went on vacation with my family a couple of weeks ago, I took her book MacDeath with me on my Kindle, and some of you saw me posting pictures on Instagram and Facebook of me and my Kindle on the beach, and MacDeath was that book that I was reading. And Cindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and to find out more about the setting that you liked and why you liked it.
Right. Before we get into that, I begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
I think a storyteller came before writer, because I was always the kid in the neighborhood who didn't want to, I didn't mind kickball, but I wanted to play pirates. I wanted to, and so I always wanted to play, I wanted to play pirates, or sometimes I wanted to play pioneers, or if it was the guys, sometimes we would play Wolverine, and not the superhero, I'm too old for that. We would actually play Wolverines. Because I really loved that world of imagination. And I was a big reader I've always been a huge reader. I probably read 400 books a year still. But I didn't really think about becoming a writer. I wrote stories when I was a kid, but the actual wanting to be a writer came quite a bit later in my life, and actually it was connected to the theater.
And speaking of the theater, that's what I was hinting at a minute ago. You write these great books that are mysteries that are set in a theater setting. What was it about theater that originally grabbed your attention?
For the books
for
or
yourself?
For myself? For myself, I was a musician, and I was actually a professional musician quite early on.
What did you play?
And at age...
What did you
play?
That?
Woodwinds, clarinet was my main instrument, and then if you are playing professionally, especially if you're doing like theater gigs, you tend to also play flute and saxophone because the scores call for everything. And my first paid gig was in the orchestra for A Little Night Music.
Nice.
And I loved it. I'd seen theater before, but I'd never experienced it as a participant. And even though I was in the orchestra and watching so much of it from below, I loved the camaraderie. I loved watching how it changed every night. I loved the immediacy of it. And eventually in college, I thought, I'd rather be on the stage than underneath it. And so I started taking singing lessons and really got to theater as a musician. But there's something, and I still really love live theater, even when even when I don't like it. Because there's something about just seeing those emotions and those stories played out, just feet from you on a stage and how real they feel.
Right. I have several writer friends who are who also participate in theater or have a theater background, and there seems to be some overlap there in the creative process. There's something about acting things out and connecting with the audience, even if you're acting someone else's dialogue and someone else's story that they've written. There's a connection there. Do you have any feelings about that?
Oh, certainly. And it's interesting because I think there's a connection in all. I was a musician first, and then actor, director, and playwright. And I think actually all of them really contribute. Yeah. Like as an actor, one of the things I loved about the theater was stepping into someone else's shoes and exploring a different world. And as a writer, that's completely true. It's I don't know if it's easier to get into that kind of zone where you become someone else, but it certainly feels very similar. And then as a director, it's really cool because I get to create whole worlds. And one of the things that I do in my books is I often have kind of wacky productions that might be difficult to put on in real life. In MacDeath, MacDeath takes place in a circus, in a 1930s kind of traveling circus, and it has some pretty wild special effects. And Sound of Murder is features a play that's a mashup of The Sound of Music and Cabaret. It's called The Sound of Cabaret. Nice. And it's really funny because no one would ever put that on. But I was like, that would be such a great play. We could have Berlin burlesque nuns dressing up as burlesque women. And so, I think the director part is like kind of just goes wild with the books because I get to create a whole world. And then obviously as a playwright, dialogue I think that's actually the biggest helped the way that theater has been the biggest help to me is in dialogue, because I'm very dialogue driven, as you can probably tell from my books. And as an actor, you're really paying attention to rhythm and how things sound. I did a lot of Shakespeare, and as a writer, I really pay attention to that, to the point where, dialogue tags and things in the middle of my sentences are very carefully placed because it's the way I like how it sounds out loud.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest tools that I use in my writing is reading my stories out loud and then acting them out and giving each character in the book a different voice or, some sort of mannerism or something like that. And
Yes.
I usually kind of do that for my family when I'm working on a book. And yeah, you can tell really quickly when something definitely doesn't work. Putting voice to that, is, there's no substitute for it.
And I love the idea that you're reading the other characters with slightly different voices and inflections too, because that's a big thing too, so that the characters don't sound like, so they sound like themselves, they sound like individuals.
Right.
Yeah.
So you went to work at age 14. You got your first professional gig, and then you got involved in theater and all of the different aspects of it, music and acting and directing and producing and all of this kind of stuff. Is that what you wanted to pursue in your adult career?
Yeah, I did, and I did it for a while. When I got out of I ended up getting a sensible degree thanks to my parents, who basically told me I would.
Right.
So I got out of school with a music therapy degree.
Interesting.
And I was working as a music therapist for a while in psychiatric institutions.
What is that?
But I was
exactly?
always
What is music therapy?
Oh, music therapy is fabulous. Music therapy is basically learning how to use music, and in psychiatric, with psychiatric clients, we use it sometimes to help people be able to talk about things. Sometimes it's almost like a group therapy starter. It works really well with teens. So for example, it might be the kind of thing where we've got was doing a group therapy session, and I had a bunch of teenagers, and I might use at that point like a Pink Floyd song,
Right.
like The Wall. And they wouldn't talk about things, about themselves, but they would start talking about The Wall, and things would come out, and sometimes we'd use it that kind of a way. Other times I helped people. I helped a young man who had difficulty learning math, but he could read music, and so that was another thing that transferred over. Sometimes you use it for relaxation. One of my kind of big successes I felt was there was a man I worked with who had a brain injury, and he could not speak more than a couple of words. He could say like boo, boo and you. And, but he sang all the time, but he sang with just those couple of words, right? So I found a song that had a lot of the ooh sounds, and it was Moonshadow by Cat Stevens. And we started working on Moonshadow, right? And by the end of a couple of months, he'd added 4 words to his vocabulary because he could sing them. He couldn't say them, but he could sing them. So it's a really cool profession, and I ended up leaving it, unfortunately, really because of a change in the way that insurance
the
works.
dreaded insurance scams.
Yeah, we had I was working at a hospital. We had a great team of art therapists and recreational therapists, music therapists, occupational therapists, and there was a change in insurance, and the whole department disbanded.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So anyway, and at that point I was like, and I'd been acting and singing all the time. And at that point I went, okay, I guess I'm ready to jump. And I did. And I was a working actor for about 7 years. And then when I traveled, I traveled a little bit. I traveled for summers. I'd done some summer gigs up in Flagstaff, Arizona, which I loved. But the first time I went on a tour, it wasn't a tour. It was a away gig. I'd gotten hired to do something in Illinois. I just realized that I didn't like the traveling lifestyle that way, because it's very different as an actor. You're not gone for a week or 2 weeks. You're gone for 3 months, and I found that it was really hard to keep an apartment. Because I'd have to sublet it to other people. It was really hard to have a relationship. I couldn't have a pet, those kind of things. So I decided at that point to not pursue it as a career and just pursue it on the side. So, but I love it. I love the theater, and at that point also, I became disabled about 2 years after that, I think. So it was probably good timing. And I had actually bought a flower shop in the meantime. I know this sounds crazy. So I bought a flower shop in the meantime, and became disabled and couldn't run the flower shop. And the thing I wanted to something I think is really important is the arts community completely came through for me, because I didn't know what I was going to do. I couldn't be an actor anymore. I couldn't run the flower shop anymore. I had some financial issues because of some stuff with the flower shop and letting people run it for me. And my community just stepped up. One came and offered me a job with health benefits. Another one said, I know you can't act, but I think you'd be a great director. It was just like, thing after I felt so taken care of and so loved. And I really, I had a little pin that says art saves lives. And I believe that in a real literal sense.
Exactly. I've had a very similar experience where just the community that you build out of artistic pursuits they're just some of the best people in the entire world. And I love my friends dearly. That it's good stuff. You brought up an interesting point just a minute ago about not pursuing it full time because of all of the stresses that the traveling and all that brought with it, but keeping that love of it and doing it for enjoyment. I think so many times a lot of us get the idea that this thing that we love needs to be our be all end all, and that art needs to kind of pay for itself, as it were, like the idea of doing something as a hobby or just out of the pure enjoyment of it. We feel like we need to monetize that. You know what I mean?
Yes. That's one of my hot buttons, actually.
And I love that you, said this is something that you love and you want to keep it in your life, but, kind of stepping away and removing the requirement that it needed to be your livelihood. I think that's especially, even in writing, it's so competitive now, and we feel like that we need to justify that time.
I know, and it's one of the things I actually really love about, this is going to sound funny, about Portland, Oregon, because I'm a big fan of community theaters and community bands and community things, so that people can have that kind of outlet without feeling like they have to be pursuing a career or getting paid for it. Because I think that can take some of the enjoyment out of it. And I think that also, I love art for art's sake. And the cool thing about Portland is, for some reason, I really feel like it's supported that way here. There are a lot of community bands, community theaters, people doing things just to do them. And sometimes it's really funny. The other thing is, it's not unusual to find people, and I'm talking Portland, Oregon, I should say. It's not unusual to find people who have a job in order to support their arts, and they're pretty proud of it. So you might, ask somebody what they do, and they might say, I'm a musician, but, my day job's a barista, or my day job's an accountant. But they really kind of claim the art and the passion, and don't mind, the the career and the kind of cultural success idea coming second.
Right. That's one of my hot button issues also, that we have to segment life like that. But and we've established that theater and music and novel writing are all kindred pursuits. In your in the midst of all this that was going on with you, and the career change, and the community that stepped in to support you, and all of that, at what point did you decide that you wanted to write a novel?
Okay, the novel. So,
or was there another? I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. You also have written plays. Was that a bridging of the gap for you?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And I started writing plays when I was working as an actor. And the first time I really did it to be produced was I was teaching a class for kids. And I couldn't find a play that I liked that included all of them in good parts. A lot of the plays had, 3 or 4 good roles, and everybody else would be a tree or something. So I wrote some, and I really enjoyed writing them, and the kids really enjoyed performing them, and they, did pretty well. And the playwriting kind of snowballed from there. Somebody saw it and said, "Oh, would you do something else?" And that I started producing plays for adults, and I've actually had, I think I've had about a dozen plays produced. I've never worked at getting any of them published because, I don't know, they've been produced and it's fun. They're all one acts. They're all funny. I like to write comedy. And it was interesting, though, because I went from plays to screenplays because I was looking for something a little bit longer with a longer arc. And I loved writing screenplays, partly because I could use a little bit more. The stories could be longer. You could explore the characters more. And so I kind of went from plays to screenplays. And then I came up here to Portland one day, and I woke up, and you're a writer. This probably happens to you. I woke up with a character in my head.
Oh, yeah.
Does that happen to you?
And they decide to carry on entire lives inside your head without your permission.
They do. And this one, Ivy Meadows, she woke up inside my head, and I knew she was an actor. And I knew she was a part-time PI. I'd actually worked with an actor who was a PI at the same time, and I always thought that'd be fascinating. So I knew those things, and I knew she was in Macbeth because it's a cursed play, of course. And I knew she didn't fit into a play. I knew she needed her own book and hopefully her own series. And the first scene, she basically kind of told me the whole first scene. It changed, as they do, especially with the first book. But she just kind of led me. And it was difficult. The first book took a long time, the novel, because I was such a playwright that I wrote lots and lots of dialogue. Right. And people would say, we don't know where we are, or we don't know what she looks like, or, all those different things. So it took me a long time to I had structure and dialogue down pretty well, but description, I had to work on. And you're like,
well, I can see her in my head. What's the problem?
Exactly. You can hear how she sounds. Right.
Well, that brings up a great point. People will say, show, not tell when writing. And usually that means, instead of giving me overt descriptions, give me, things in dialogue and mannerisms and things like that I can, figure out what's going on without you just telling me what's going on. It seems like you went kind of to the opposite side of the road and needed to come in and learn to tell a little bit as well as show.
I did definitely. And it's, now I really enjoy it. And when I first was telling, though, what I would do is I would have like whole chunks of big, there'd be like a page of description. Right. And my writing group, luckily I've had great writing groups here in Portland. I've had great workshops. I've been working with people. I have great critique groups. And they've helped me a lot because, my original writing was really clunky. And the other thing I did, which I still like but was not very marketable, was the first time I wrote MacDeath, I wrote it in shifting first-person points of view.
Nice.
Because I'm such a playwright. So you heard from Ivy, she was the protagonist, but you also got the point of view from Linda, the stage manager, who had a very different voice. And I still love my there was a death scene from the victim's point of view, which I still love and I haven't been able to use anywhere. But when I was shopping around, several different agents said, this is really fun and you've done a nice job, but it doesn't work for a book of this type. If this was a literary fiction book, you might be able to get away with it, but this is a fun, fast read, and it needs to stay in one point of view.
And that's really sad, because that sounds really amazing, and I think I would love that kind of roving point of view. That sounds really fun, but I get that might, some people may kind of be shocked a little bit by and have trouble keeping up. How long ago did you write that first book, or did you begin working on it?
Well, I moved to Portland in 2007, and I began working on it. I think she kind of downloaded herself into my head sometime that winter. So I started working on it then. But also I write full time for a living. And one of the things I do is ghostwrite. And so I ghost wrote 2 books before MacDeath was ever published. So I took big breaks, and fiddled with it. And then also at one point I really wasn't sure if MacDeath was going to sell, and so I started working on the second one, The Sound of Murder. And so it's interesting because MacDeath was eventually first published in January 2015, but I can't really say it took me, and I turned it in, of course, in I guess May of 2014. But I can't say it really took me 7 years because it was so many breaks and other books and things like that going on. But and even now I'd love to, grab it back and fiddle with a few things. Oh
yeah. There's nothing worse than when you have the printed book in your hand and you go, man, I really wish I'd have done this different. So how did you get?
Yeah.
It absolutely does. And if someone says it doesn't happen to them, they're lying. But how did you get into ghostwriting? I think a lot of people think they kind of romanticize I get up and I write all day, every day, and it's amazing. And I'm just, putting words on paper and everything is beautiful. And I've done some ghostwriting too, and it's hard, especially getting someone else's voice. And, so how did you get started doing that?
Well, I was copywriting. I was doing copywriting. And it was interesting because my first copywriting gig came because of theater too. Somebody was in the audience of one of my plays, and afterwards, it was a friend of mine. And afterwards, he came up to me and said, "I know somebody who needs a writer. You want to meet with him?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So, and I'd done a little bit of copywriting for the theater. I'd done some because in the theater, as we spoke before we started this interview, you do a little bit of everything. And so I had done some copywriting and some, press releases and articles and stuff for theater organizations I'd been with. So I'm losing my thread. Wait, tell me again.
How did you get into ghostwriting? Yeah.
Ghostwriting. Okay, so the copywriting was there, and I'd already kind of done a little bit of ghostwriting because it's like speech writing and things for people at that point through the copywriting. And then I was at a conference, and it was actually an accessibility and travel conference because I told you I became disabled, and I was working in arts access to the arts advocacy for a while. And I'd gone to a conference. I was speaking to a woman. She said, she was a businesswoman. And she said, "I really, really want to write a book. Would you like to help me?" And I said, for a small fee. And and we worked that out, and she liked the book. It did well. And then it was kind of the word of mouth thing. Somebody else, got it from, talked to her publisher. There's another guy that I met again through the arts who I started writing for, and I was doing some content writing for him. And one of his clients liked the way I captured his voice when I wrote a blog for him and said, "Hey, I want to write a book," and it goes from there. So it is hard though. I only write, I ghostwrite nonfiction. I don't think I could ghostwrite fiction. I think that would take too many of my own creative brain cells.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah, so I do nonfiction, and I really enjoy it, and I think actually that being a playwright and an actor really helps me, because I think the thing I'm best at is capturing the voice.
There's something about you're ready to step into someone else's shoes. You've been that's kind of your thing, that when you're an actor, you step on stage and you become that character. And ghostwriting and picking up someone else's voice is kind of that same skill set.
And it's really fun because you're like, I actually just did a piece yesterday, and I was thinking, he would not use that word. He would not use that word. What word would he use? I have to kind of really think about that sometimes. And sometimes I do a better job, I think, than others. But I'm always conscious of their voice in my head.
Right. So let's get back to Ivy Meadows for just a second. So,
yes.
How did you find a publisher for it? And I know you went through the revision process with your writers group and got some good feedback, and you kind of whittled on it and modified it until you got to the point that it was ready to go. How did you get it out to the world?
Well, it took me a while. I went through several different. I had the good fortune of some agents that were interested right off and kind of talked me through some of the issues with it, like the first person point of view. And then I rewrote it all, that took a long time, let me tell you. I rewrote it all to be in Ivy's point of view and started sending it out again. And I ran into a second issue, which was, they said the murder was too far in. That typically in today's publishing, especially for a debut novel, they want a body by page 30. And I thought, so I rewrote it and I moved it earlier, but I couldn't get it up to page 30. And I swear there's something going on with this. So I couldn't get it up to page 30, but I still really liked it. And so I was starting to actually work on the second book and shop that around. But I had gone to the Left Coast Crime Conference, which is, for over here on the West Coast, fairly big conference, around 600 people, I guess. And I heard Kendall Lynn, who's the publisher for Henry Press, I heard her on a panel, and I really liked her. I liked her energy. I liked how she, talked about publishing. I liked what she was enthusiastic about. And I went down to the bookstore and I looked at all Henry Press's books because I wasn't that familiar with them. And I really liked how the books looked. They looked really professional. Some small presses I haven't been quite as impressed with. So I actually didn't know if it was a place to pitch her there. So I didn't. But I wrote to her right afterwards and told her I'd seen her on this panel. And the other thing that really helped me at that point was I had entered a contest. It was a first page contest for an online magazine out of the UK called Words with Jam. And they had a first page contest, and it was going to be judged by Sue Grafton. Cool. So I was like, wow, I'm going to enter that. And I entered the first page of The Sound of Murder. And I got third place, which is pretty big because it was a big contest. It was Sue Grafton, right? So the combination of when I wrote to Kendall, the fact that I said I'd been at LCC, I'd seen her speak, and then I had this award, she said it kind of raised me out of the slush pile.
Nice.
So I went directly, and then she called me, and she said she wanted to talk to me about it. And she called me, and she said, "We love this. We think it's funny, la, la, la." And then she said, "But the murder's too far back.
I've already tried.
I know. I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, I do. And she told me how to fix it. And I was like, oh my God.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it was great. I love my publisher. I love them, love them. So I got to them without an agent. And they do still take unagented submissions, Henry Press. I'm very happy with them. They focus on light mysteries, comedic, some cozy. They have a few more kind of serious, but light is really their focus. And I think they've been great. And she helped me fix MacDeath, which I really, really wanted to be the first book. Because I think there's since you've read it, there's a twist that happens about halfway through, where you, with a character who's not been on the page till then. And if I had done it in The Sound of Murder, I think I would have missed that twist if I'd started with The Sound of Murder.
Gotcha. You've mentioned a couple of times and said that people loved the book because it was lighthearted and that there was a lot of comedy there, and you said that you love comedy and witty dialogue and things like that. There's a certain people that enjoy that tend to have a little bit of gallows humor, and being able to inject a little bit of levity into serious situations. Was that something that you've always loved? Is this something you developed into? What is it about mixing comedy and levity with someone getting murdered?
I know. I know. And it's really funny because one of the things I really enjoy about my books too is this is going to sound odd. Well, you've read it. They all kind of explore some serious subjects. Besides murder, there's some serious things going on, but I really love the comedy with them. And I think it's how I would like to see the world. I mean, I do see the world that way. I'm definitely an optimist. I'm definitely the glass half full. You know, if I'm looking outside on a gray day, I'll see the bird instead of the clouds. But I read something. I read a lot about comedy because I'm trying to study it, and I teach some workshops on it. And there is a teacher workshop leader named Steve Kaplan, and he said that comedy, the basic equation for comedy is an ordinary person struggling against odds to attain some kind of goal without all the requisite tools to get there and never losing hope. And I think the thing I love about comedy is the hope. Right. I think there's always that, this is going to work out, and actually it's a little like theater. We were talking earlier about how you just make things work. You just assume that you can do it and make it work. And I love that about comedy. I love that kind of hopefulness, even when you don't have the tools and you're in a really dark place. There's that hope that shines through and keeps you kind of going. And I think that's the other reason I like to write mysteries, is because I like the hope and the justice that comes with them.
Right. Is that something that you've always kind of been equipped with, or is that something that you've come to, through hardship or something like that? And I'll clarify my question, because, my wife and I, we have 5 kids, and with a family that big, there's always, stuff going on. And you learn to make jokes about things, maybe someone's in the hospital or someone's sick, and you learn to deal with things as a family through kind of poking fun at the elephant in the room, hopefully our kids develop a sense of humor, albeit sometimes a little sick because of the subject matter. But it's a great coping mechanism, and it helps to inject a little hope into those situations. And I've noticed that my tendencies toward those things grows and matures when we are dealing with some sort of adversity.
Yeah, I would say that. it's interesting because I didn't grow up in a family like that, so it's certainly not been. And I think I was a pretty serious little kid.
Me too. Way too
Yeah,
serious.
I think so. I think actually it's probably as an adult that as a coping mechanism has come into my life. And I think I think there's two things. I mean, I think one is for myself. It's interesting whenever I have a really difficult time in my life, what I tend to do in the end of the day is like if somebody, for example, if somebody's dying or in the hospital or something like that is going on, or I'm having a lot of trouble, I tend to come home at the end of the day and then kind of binge watch certain TV comedies to just, Frasier or 30 Rock or South Park or whatever. I can actually, look at different times in my life and know what was going on. So I think that it was a comfort to me. And then also, I mentioned, that I became disabled, and I'm doing pretty well right now. But, it was a tough time. It was a big change in my life. And I also, after that, I became involved, I mentioned, in advocacy for accessibility issues. And I found at that point, I think that's one of the places I started developing my own sense of humor, because it helped in dealing with the situations that because I was working for the government, and I used to say that I'd walk into a room and I knew I was going to piss off half the room, whether it would be the advocates who wanted the accessibility to happen, or the people who were there who really didn't want it to happen. And I think, humor and levity really went a long way toward making people feel comfortable and understanding that it was like a human question, not just, some kind of government mandate or something coming in. So I think that I have never thought of it, but thank you for asking that. It's an interesting question, and I will think more about that.
I think you talked about it being a human question. There's something about humor that connects us to our humanity. When we're stuck in the most dismal situations, it's the humor that brings us that hope. A book I wrote called Writer's Block. There's a character that is in the most horrific personal situation, and I have a character that's a dog that is kind of my injection of comedy. That's kind of his personal foil throughout all of this, and those are the things I get comments about most often, is this contentious relationship between this guy who's nearly suicidal and this dog that just won't let him be. There's it's just.
And that's the dog's the hope. The dog is the hope, because he's probably yeah. No, I love that.
So Ivy Meadows, after MacDeath, did she come calling again? Did you know she was going to have another story, or did she come knocking on your brain one day and say, "Hey, I've got another situation to drop in"?
Yeah, I knew even before I sold it that I had a couple more books in me. Ivy had a couple more books than her. So The Sound of Murder is the second one. And I was working on that when it was about maybe half done when I got the contract for MacDeath, which I got a 3-book contract from Henry. So I knew we'd have at least 3. And yeah, she came. My dad volunteered for a posse in Arizona.
Wow.
I know. In Maricopa County, there's a sheriff that was famous for a while. He's gone now. Sheriff Joe Arpaio. And he realized that he found that you could still have posses. It was on the books still. And so he organized like 90 of them, basically because he didn't feel like he had enough paid police. And so there's like all these little volunteer police forces all over Maricopa County. And my dad works on one in a retirement community in Sun City West. And I loved the idea of this volunteer police department in a retirement community. So I knew I wanted to set something there. And so the next Sound of Murder is set in a dinner theater on the edge of that community, and has a lot of older actors in it. And that's that one that's the mashup of Sound of Music and Cabaret. I knew on the third one, I love Dickens. And by the way, he's in the public domain, which is something I hadn't thought about a lot before beginning a theater series. I love Dickens, so I tried to figure out which story was the most familiar to people, and it was Oliver because of the musical and all the stories. All the different film adaptations. So that's where Oliver Twisted came from, and I knew I wanted to set it when I thought about what kind of setting did we have now that was still kind of stratified in terms of class? Because in Oliver Twisted, you definitely have the criminal class, the class that's really poor, and then you have the upper class, and there's the clash between them all the time. And I was trying to figure out like a place we had that now, and I came up with ships because there's a definite difference in class and in people's economic circumstances between the travelers and the crew. So I thought that would be fun, and that was great fun. That was the third book. The fourth book comes out this May 16th, and it's called Ivy, Get Your Gun. And I love this. This may be my favorite book of all of them. And it came from my mom clipped out a article and sent it to me, as moms do. And it was last fall in Tombstone, Arizona. They always put on, gunfights, recreations of the OK Corral, right? The gunfight at the OK Corral. Well, one of the actors had real bullets in his gun, and he shot the other actor and winged a tourist.
Oh my gosh!
The guy lived, but they had to air vac him out to Tucson. So I was just like, well, there's the beginning of the story.
Oh yeah. Which is funny because people say, where do you come up with ideas from? Literally, you just need to open your eyes. Ideas are all around you.
I know. I say the one thing I will regret when I'm dying, I know the one thing I will regret is I didn't have time to write all the stories in my head because I have just a ton of them.
Right.
And right now I'm working on the fifth book. So I know there's going to be 6 now. Henry gave me a contract for 3 more. Oh, and by the way, I should say MacDeath was nominated for an Agatha Award, which is kind of a big deal. It's one of only 5 people in the United States and Canada are up for it. And I was one of the 5, so I didn't win, but I was really happy about that. And I think that also, Henry was happy about it too.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons I have my next contract. But yeah, I'm going to be doing 6. I'm working on the 5th one right now, which is called The Phantom of Oz, and takes place. It's kind of a little gothic story in a haunted theater. And then my last one, I believe, is going to be called Kill a Lot. I know, I love that title. I should say my last one. The last one in this particular contract, the 6th one, is going to be called.
So you said originally you got a 3-book contract, then they gave you a second 3-book contract. Obviously, Henry is excited about what's going on with these books. Yeah.
Yes, and like I said, I'm very, very happy with them. I think it's interesting now being an author. We talk a lot with each other about our editors and our publishers and what's going on, and I feel like I have the best editor I've heard of. Best editing team. We have lots and lots of revisions. They're very thorough. They're very careful, and they get my sense of humor too, which is really nice. So I really love, and I think they do a great job. I'm really happy with them.
If someone is kind of on the fence about trying one of the Ivy Meadows books, what's kind of your elevator pitch to get someone intrigued about what's going on in your stories?
Oh, elevator pitches are so hard. My tagline is Madcap Mysteries that in the off Broadway world of theater. That's my my tagline. And I would say, I got a great review in Mystery Scene from MacDeath, and it said that, that it's difficult to combine humor with pathos, but that I did it well. And I had someone else, somebody who blurred my book, say something about the fact that they're right in the middle of a sparkly caper is some real human drama and connection. And I think that's what I would like to tell people about my book. They're really funny, and you'll probably laugh and have a good time. But hopefully they'll stay with you too, because there's some heart to them. And like I said, there's usually a serious core that is in each of them. So I think if you're looking for, quality mind candy. That was another thing somebody else said. Quality mind candy. Because I think, they are light. They're a fast read. They're funny. But I do think they tend to stay with people because the plots and the characters go through some real stuff.
And a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Oh, Cindy, one final question for you before we go. What is the best place to hide a body?
Yes, in my newsletter, I always have the best places to hide the body picture. I know. And you know what? In real life, it'd probably be in my blackberry bushes because no one would go in there and the coyotes would eat them. But the way I started thinking about this, I was actually going to the theater, and in the theater downtown here in Portland at the Armory, there is a water feature that kind of runs along the side of it. And it's a very narrow water feature with kind of almost like a steps on one side that are kind of high, maybe like 3 feet. And then, water trickles down, and that trickles down into a trench, for lack of a better word, that kind of runs the length of the block. And that trench is filled with water plants, high kind of, reeds and things like that. And I just looked down there once and I thought, oh my God, that is a great place to hide a body. And it just kind of came from there.
I love it. Cindy, where can people find you if they've liked our conversation today and they want to get plugged in to follow you and to buy your books? Where's do you have a central location where we can send people?
You bet. My website, which is cindybrownwriter.com. There are a couple other Cindy Browns. I'm not the Playboy bunny or the basketball player.
Good to know.
So that's why it's cindybrownwriter.com. And on there also, I have something that's fun. You mentioned the dead body. I have what we call the Slightly Silly newsletter. It comes out every month. And I always have a good where to hide the dead body photo, and as well as a little theater news and mystery quizzes, and of course, little book news. And I would love it if people would be interested in signing up and taking a look at that. And of course, you can find my books online and at independent bookstores and libraries, and I hope they like them. I hope you. I'm really glad you did.
And your publicist sent me the first book, MacDeath, and then I immediately went and bought the other 2 books that are in print now. And they're sitting on my Kindle right now. Yeah,
thank you.
I loved it. I was an instant fan. I think I even emailed your publicist from the car on the way down. I said I couldn't make it all the way to the beach. I said I'm hooked already. So yeah, it was great. So
good. Well, I think they get better. I like the first one, but that's the other thing as a writer. It's interesting to watch your own your own skills develop.
It really is.
Yeah.
And thank you, Cindy. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Now stay tuned for an audio clip from Richard Gleave's Jason Crane series. Right now, from April 4th to April 8th, you can get Rise, Headless, and Ride, the first book in the Jason Crane trilogy, free on Amazon. Don't forget to go pick it up. There's a link in the show notes.
Jason and Joey took their food trays outside and sat high above the parking lot on the secluded stairwell that had become their lunchtime hangout, picking at their Thanksgiving specials and swapping updates. They were almost finished eating before Jason managed to screw up the courage to say what he needed to. "I want to apologize." Joey looked puzzled. "What the hell for?" "Because your coma was my fault." "Yours? The horseman beamed me. You didn't." "Hey, want to see something cool? Look what I found on my phone." Joey produced the device, hit a few buttons, and swiped his finger. An orange circle hung in a field of black, overexposed, something that had been moving fast when the flash caught it. I was trying to get his picture, right? Like an idiot? Well, I didn't get him, but that is the pumpkin he threw at me. Jason stared at the blurry orange shape for a long time. Cool. Cool? Can you imagine if we actually got a picture of the Headless Horseman? We'd be famous by now. He pocketed the phone. Hey, do you want the rest of this turkey? It looks like bologna. Tastes like bologna, too. He speared the slice anyway. Look, this is going to sound weird, but I think I made you a target. What do you mean? I made you a target by telling you about my gift. It's some sort of magical rule. If we reveal ourselves to a normal person, whoever we tell becomes a target for ghosts. And usually, they die. And you told me anyway? No, I'd already told you. There was no way to untell you. Don't be mad. It all worked out, right? Right? Joey's expression had darkened. Give me a second here. And there's a bright side. What bright side? Now you'll have a gift too. Me? That's what your coma was. Some kind of transition. You got targeted, but you survived. You'll be a founder now, like Ichabod. You'll pass your gift to your kids like he passed his to me. Joey looked worried. What kind of gift will I get? People get gifts that complement their natural abilities. It could be anything. Anything? So, I could read minds? I guess. Turn purple and levitate? Probably not. Something that expresses the essential you. Then I'll have an actor's gift. What's an actor's gift? Jason shrugged. Super narcissism? Shut up. So you're not mad? Joey was shaking with excitement. Mad? This is the coolest thing ever! We'll be like the dynamic duo, fighting supernatural foes up and down the eastern seaboard. Jason laughed, feeling epic relief. I thought you'd be pissed. Nah. What's a little coma between friends? He took a bite out of a Nutter Butter, grinning madly. I'm going to be a superhero. But you can't tell anyone. Why not? Weren't you listening? Everyone we tell dies. You can't talk about your gift to anybody. But if they were targeted and lived, we could have our own X-Men. Yeah, or all your friends could die. Do you want to risk that? No, I guess not. But I don't do closets very well, you know? I came out at conception. Promise to keep it to yourself. Yeah. Joey shifted sideways and walked his sneakers up the brick. So, the essential me. Ooh, I know what gift I'll get. I'll get a singer's gift. What's a singer's gift? Jason shrugged. Superhuman drug tolerance? Shut up!
You've been listening to the Author Stories podcast with Hank Garner. You can find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com. When you're there, please subscribe to the show and leave a comment over on iTunes or Google